Morning and welcome to our August edition of our Women in Food and Farming broadcast. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kirsty Barden and I'm the Head of Business Development at MDS. I'm also part of the steering committee for Women in Food and Farming. I'm sure many of you know what Women in Food and Farming is, but we are a committee set up to support and encourage women at different stages of their careers in the industry. We do this through hosting fantastic events like this with our wonderful guest speaker today, Barbara Bray. We also host live events throughout the year where people can get together, have networking sessions with a variety of guest speakers. We've also recently launched in the last few months our own Women in Food and Farming website. So if you haven't seen it already, please do go and have a look. You can have a look at all of our previous videos, as well as see upcoming events focused for women within the industry, not just Women in Food and Farming events. So I'd like to welcome today Barbara. Barbara, thank you for joining us. Barbara's work has focused on, there's quite a lot to read about the fantastic Barbara, so I do apologise if I'm reading a huge stream, but she's very interesting. So Barbara's work has focused on delivering safe and nutritious, sustainable food for everyone. She works to deliver safety in the food supply, as well as working within the food supply chains and nutrition strategy for business. Prior to working as a consultant, Barbara worked in the Ugandan agribusiness sector before spending 14 years in technical roles within the European chilled food sector. She became a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition, following an MSc in human nutrition. Her leadership roles have included being director of the Oxford Farming Conference and representing the private sector mechanism in speeches at the UN Committee for Food Security in Rome. She is also a fellow and committee member of IFST and a trustee of the Nutrition Society. Currently, Barbara is researching diet to protect the health of older adults in a doctoral training programme at the Centre for Public Health at Queen's University, Belfast. I did skip a few bits from your bio there, Barbara, because I wanted to make sure that we had something to talk about. But thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure to be on the stream today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you and seeing some of the comments from the listeners as well.
And that's great. And so as Barbara mentioned, we are streaming live. You can write comments to us. We will answer your questions as they pop up as much as we can. You can also put any questions you have at the end if you wish, if you want to save them up. And we'll make sure that we get to answer as many of the questions as we can. So Barbara, going through your bio, that's a fantastic and really interesting background, and obviously very nutritional based. What was it that sort of initially sparked you to consider that within your education and then to take it on as a career?
I think it was something that evolved for me. I don't remember the one point of crossing the line and saying, yes, this is definitely it. It was more an evolution from childhood. So as a child, I've got two younger sisters, and as a family, we would often do things in the kitchen. So I was born in the 70s. So my mother was a stay-at-home mum at that time, preparing all food from scratch. So I loved to get my fingers dirty, and we'd go and pick strawberries or soft fruit in the summer, do all those kind of things where we were in and around food. And it was more, I guess, food in those years, those days, it was more about preparing things from scratch rather than having things ready made. And as we grew up, so we grew up in that era of things like Finter's crispy pancakes and the mini pizzas and all the kind of foods that we'd run away from now, but they were all novel. And I was so fascinated how you prepared things like that from raw materials. So I had an inherent interest in how food was made, where it came from, how it was grown and produced. And it was something that always fascinated me. But as a child, I didn't have any idea what careers were out there. You know, my mother's a nurse, my dad's a doctor. We didn't know anyone in the food industry. And as I was thinking of choices at GCSE level and things that I wanted to do, I'd heard about dietitians and I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. My dad just laughed. He was like, you'll never earn the kind of money you need to survive doing that sort of job, because at the time it was really poorly paid. And I remember thinking, well, I want to work with food, but I just don't know what's out there. and mentioned it to a teacher at school. And she said, right, we have the careers day coming up. We'll find somebody who'll be useful for you to talk to. And true to their word, they brought in a food scientist who was working at a dairy processing company. I spent the whole entire time talking to this lady. And she'd been to university at Reading, she'd done a food science degree, and I just thought that was the best thing in the world. So I applied to Reading. I actually ended up doing food technology as my degree, and it suited me down to the ground because it was very multidisciplinary. I got involved in food marketing, food manufacture, food microbiology, food chemistry. It was a great opportunity to see all the different aspects. Unfortunately, there wasn't much nutrition in it, and that was something that came later once I'd got several years behind me and realised that we've done lots of things with food, but not necessarily focused on people's health.
Absolutely. And Barbara, can you explain to me, is there a significant difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist, or are they very much on the same vein?
I think the issue is that you can chop and change a little bit, and that causes a lot of confusion. So a registered dietitian is registered with the, I want to try and remember the word for it, the Health Protection Council, HPC anyway. So they are clinically trained and they're registered to work in hospitals with patients. As a nutritionist, you're trained, but in terms of the degree that I have, I'm a nutrition scientist. So I'm not approved to go into a hospital and work with somebody with kidney disease, for example. So if you think of it more as practitioners working with disease versus a practitioner working on food and science, that's an arbitrary way of looking at it, because there are dietitians who do go into nutrition world and work with manufacturers, for example, and work on the nutrition science side. And there are some nutritionists who then retrain and become dietitians and go and work in hospitals. So it does muddy the waters, but it's important to realise that if you are sick and you need help, for example, if you've got some swallowing difficulties or if you've got particular disease, then a nutritionist is not qualified to treat those things unless they've had the right training and they have that dietitian's qualification. But some dietitians also market themselves as nutritionists, which isn't helpful from a public point of view because you don't know what to look out for. But a registered dietitian will have RD, registered dietitian will have RD as part of their title. A registered nutritionist, if they're Association for Nutrition, it'll be R-Nutra, N-U-T-R. So they're the main two. There are other variations on that, but I'll keep it simple. I think it's best just not to complicate it any further than I already have.
No, I think it's really enlightening because there is a lot. We live in a age of lots of social media, and there's lots of people out there who are giving fantastic advice and direction when it comes to nutrition and healthy eating for those people who aren't in the know. But there's also, with that, a lot of people who will potentially say they are one thing or the other and maybe don't have the scientific research behind it. It's more based on personal opinion and can give out some quite damaging advice at times. Do you think that there's a risk of that?
There is, because unlike dietitians, to be a nutritionist, it's not a protected legal title. So anyone can call themselves a nutritionist if they've done any course. You can just use that as a title. Obviously, I'm a registered nutritionist, so you can look at my name on the register for the Association for Nutrition. But there are lots of other organisations where they just create any random register and say, look at all our lovely nutritionists. They might have done a 4-hour course on nutrition or something, and they are, or celebrities, for example, who say, well, I've studied nutrition in my spare time, and now I'm telling you the advice I've got from working with my friends and family. It's not quite the same thing, so that is a problem. But people trust who they know, and that's the unfortunate thing. They don't necessarily trust a professional. It's just human nature. You'll talk to your hairdresser or the person that delivers your food or your Amazon parcels, but you never think to go out and hire a professional, and I think that is a problem.
Absolutely. And your research at the moment is focusing on some nutrition and health in older adults, but generally health and nutrition in total. Christine's asked, how do we teach people and ourselves about ultra-processed food and its effect on our health? Is big food a problem? Is this something that you're seeing in your research?
It is, and it's quite complex because it's not a question of all or nothing. And like with anything, particularly with dietary advice, is about everything in moderation. And if you think of older adults, for example, when I've been into nursing homes and looked at how we are going to help maintain people's nutritional status, you do need an element of processed food for people who can't swallow or chop or cut their food. Without ultra-processed food, they wouldn't be here. So you can make ultra-processed food as healthy or as unhealthy as you want, but obviously if you're supplying to a nursing home, it's going to be a balanced diet with the right proportion that's designed to help maintain the health and strength of that individual. On the flip side, you've also got chocolate, ice cream, crisps, which aren't essential for life, let's face it. It's more about enjoyment and pleasure. And unfortunately, it's the muddying of the waters that's brought everything and stuck it all in one basket, regardless of its health properties or not. So everybody understands that if you were to eat chocolate, crisps and ice cream and cake every day, that wouldn't be helpful for your health. So we're not saying that we should stop eating ultra-processed foods. It's more about the health message that goes with it. And it is difficult to tease out. We don't necessarily have all of the evidence to say what is on the right side of health and what isn't. And it also depends on what metrics you're looking at. Are you talking about the nutritional quality? Are you talking about just one aspect of nutrition, for example, just the carbohydrates as a nutrient or just the protein? And if you think about how we've had this relationship with processed vegan food, it's all been about let's try and reduce the footprint from a climate point of view by using vegan foods. But obviously once you start processing, that can increase the footprint, even from a carbon footprint, water footprint, so on. But it can also change the format of the food, so it's not necessarily helpful from a digestibility point of view. So there are so many different factors in that. And I think big food can be a problem. We've all worked in businesses where people have made poor decisions. And sometimes I look at the award-winning competitions you see where people have got an award for a particular product and you think, did nobody sit in that MPD meeting and go, no, why are we doing this? Like, where was that sensible person? And you can see them winning the award and you're like, yes, I get that it's a miracle of technology. You know, I'm a food technologist. I get that some things you've achieved them. And it's absolutely amazing what you can do with molecules and with science. But you have to look back and say, what value does this add to people's lives? And if it's just the nice colour that it has and the bit of entertainment, and people are going to be having it in place of a nutritious meal, then you've failed. And I think some people don't quite make that link and go, yeah, maybe that's not such a good idea. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I absolutely see this in terms of food which are promoted as being healthy. I know lots of us are now aware of things which they say, oh, they're low fat or they're lower sugar. A lot of that has been replaced with things which have equally bad effects on our health. But I'm definitely seeing more things promoted as being healthy for you. Things like protein powders and shakes and food replacement products. I won't name any. You just think, I never know who's going to be watching. But you see these things and you're like, to me personally, that look, it's meant to be, oh, it's cost saving and it's quick, but it's real food. I'm like, it can't be real food. It's powdered. And how healthy are these food supplements and these healthy things that say, well, if you look at me, I've got this lovely ripped body and I'm all muscle because I'm in my 20s and I have 20 protein shakes a day. Do you think there's a risk of health foods being actually detrimental to our nutritional intake?
For me, I think the problem comes in how people view their entire diet. So there is a place for shakes when you need them. For example, if I'm in the car and I don't want to stop and get some kind of fast food product, sometimes a balanced shake is a good alternative when there's no other option that's healthy. So it's finding the right product for the right situation. But I think the issue comes in when people start to obsess about having only certain things and they reduce their diet down. So it just becomes about, well, I'll have 3 shakes a day, nothing else. And that's where you tipped the balance over from having something occasionally as a support to your wider diet, which is already quite rich and diverse, and then just narrowing down your food choices to something when you've got the capacity to take in lots of other foods. Again, if you're ill or you're having feeding support because you can't swallow and you're sick, then obviously the shake is the only option. So it's about not demonizing a particular food because of what it is, but it's how it's used and where it fits in with people's diet that's really important. And there are some people that have a really poor relationship with food. They don't like to cook, they don't like to prepare or sit down and eat in a way that's helpful or beneficial for their lifestyle. And once that relationship's broken, that can lead into other problematic behaviours. I think it's all related, and it's not just about one poor behaviour or one poor decision. It often links into other things as well.
And do you feel that there's quite a lot of responsibility, but there's quite a lot of impact on certain trends and how that changes? I remember I would say maybe when I was about sort of late teens, everything was about smoothies. Smoothies were the healthiest thing you could have, and they were really promoted. Everyone had the ninja thing, didn't they? And then research came out saying, well, actually, smoothies aren't that good for you because they break down the cells, release more sugars, which gives you spikes those blood sugars. So they became sort of passe. And then it was like, oh, but you can have it if you chuck in loads of nuts and things into it. What do you feel is going to be the next thing that we might be looking at and thinking, well, actually, no, maybe that isn't the best health choice for us?
I think anything that forces you to stop eating a wide and varied diet is not great, because we're designed to have that diversity in our diet for a reason. So when you hear about you have to have lots of different types of fruit and vegetables, there's a reason behind it. So I think the whole smoothie thing, where people are trying to pack in lots of things into one small meal and tick a box, people are always trying to take shortcuts to what should be about having wholesome diets and spread. It's almost like spreading your risk, isn't it? If you have a little bit of lots of different things, it's less risky than focusing or putting all your eggs in one basket, pardon the pun, and having the same thing over and over again, because you're still narrowing the range of nutrients. And you need to eat in a way that's helpful for your body. And obviously taking everything in as a liquid isn't great. You need to be able to chew your food and develop the saliva and all the digestive activity that needs to happen to digest your food well. So if you're shortcutting that process all the time, it's not great. And I think there always will be food technologists and developers who are looking and chasing the next big thing and not thinking through about the consequences if people make it a staple of their diet, and it isn't just one element of their diet that makes up a rich tapestry of foods that should be helpful for health. Because we're all busy, we're all tired, we're all chasing convenience, and unfortunately we end up, and there's a statistic that says a lot of people just end up having the same 6 meals on rotation a lot of the time, and that's not great.
No, and you can understand then that people sort of break down their ability to try new things. Kate Russell says, most of us wouldn't think to consult a nutritionist ourselves. How could we mainstream that type of advice, and how might it be packaged to be accessible and affordable?
One thing that you can do is, if you want to access a nutritionist, you can look up either a registered dietitian or registered nutritionist on the relevant website. So I can give you the links for those as well. In terms of advice that's there and easily available, so the British Nutrition Foundation has got its consumer facing, so they have a website that shows you kind of type in a question and all the answers will come up, or it will show you links to different documents where you can get that advice for free. So it's going to known and trusted resources. Obviously Association for Nutrition and British Dietetic Association have theirs, but it's aimed more at professionals. So there tends to be documents and training aimed just for people who are those professionals, but it's about finding the right consumer websites as well. So if you like, afterwards, I can send you some links to places where people can access trusted and evidence-based information.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we make sure we'll put that up on the Women in Food and Farming website. Mm-hmm. Now, Barbara, your current research is focusing around nutrition, particularly within ageing communities. Now, I think when we chatted before, we spoke about how actually a lot of media attention tends to be on nutrition for younger people, particularly around the responsibility of parents giving the right nutrition to their children. Yeah. Where do you think the media is sort of missing that message, and how important do you think it is for people to be aware of the importance of getting that nutrition right all the way up through the different stages of life?
Well, I'm hoping that we'll start to see a shift, because when I look at my peers, we've all got parents who are in their late 70s and heading towards their 80s. And you kind of think, well, I know media people tend to be a bit younger, but surely they must visit their grandparents or at least see some older people somewhere in their environment. And there comes a point, usually around retirement, where you start to see people getting chronic illnesses, or you'll hear of friends and relatives who are passing on and thinking, oh, they seem too young to die or too young to get that particular disease or chronic illness, and you think, well, what can I do differently to stop myself heading down that road? So what tends to happen in your mid to late 30s, people start to see those things happening in their friends and family and think, oh, I need to make some changes here. So I'm hoping that kind of penny drop moment is what's going to happen within people in the media, and they'll start to realise you need to start thinking about what's going to happen as we age. I know for financial companies and pension companies, they're blue in the face trying to get all this information out there, and I really do feel that they try so hard, but everyone's like, yeah, I'll deal with that later. So I feel for anyone who's a financial advisor or pension specialist, because they've got their work cut out. People want to deal with the here and now of today. They don't want to think about years and years and years later, how they can manage their lives. But the problem is we are unconsciously incompetent about aging. We might pay into a pension plan, but we never think, what do we need to think about our aging process? What might change as we age? Who is going to be in our network? Who are we going to have our meals with? How are we going to spend our time? Because social isolation and loneliness, the development of chronic disease, how we have a relationship with food, all of those things will change as we age. So it's important to stay as healthy as we can for as long as we can, and push those chronic illnesses and diseases further down the road as much as possible, especially with the kind of issues that we're seeing with the healthcare system at the moment, where you can't get instant access to healthcare. So it's really important that we look after our bodies in that kind of midlife to aging period, so that we don't have to worry about, oh, how are we going to deal with this disease in the here and now? The longer you can leave it to start getting chronic diseases and illnesses, the better.
Yeah. And do you think, obviously, when COVID first hit, the biggest concern group were people with that type 2 diabetes and obesity problems. Do you think that has had an effect on people thinking, well, actually, there is the potential for other diseases which are going to impact me if I'm in this high risk area because of my nutritional choices?
Yes, there was a lot of concern around immune health, and also making sure that people didn't get those metabolic diseases, so the things like the type 2 diabetes and hypertension and so on. And unfortunately, those are the things that creep up on us without us realising. And a lot of people will measure their weight day in, day out, but never think to check their blood pressure, cholesterol levels and things like that. And it's really important to know our numbers as we age. And by knowing your numbers, you can do something about it, whether it's about changing your diet, whether it's about doing more exercise, or whether it's about getting the appropriate medication. Because for some people, depending on your genetics, you might be more, the prevalence of high blood pressure might be something that is within your family. So the lifestyle changes might not necessarily help that. So it's about seeking the right solution for the things that are developing as you age, and it's really important. And I don't think those worries and concerns that we had when we saw COVID are going to go anywhere. I think we will be becoming more and more concerned about our health as we start to realise the stresses of modern living are causing us to become chronically ill more early than we used to.
I've seen an increased trend in health monitoring devices, ones which will measure your blood sugar levels, for example, similar to somebody who was diabetic might measure those and to track them and to help you identify health issues early on. Is there much research in terms of the links between those and actually having an effect, or would you recommend actually doing your health checks with your physician, your doctor?
I think it's about deciding what's important for you, and having that conversation with your GPs is really key. So you can also start this whole trend of worried well. And I think if you are a worried well person, getting a continuous glucose monitor is not for you, because you don't necessarily know what that means. You don't know whether it's something that you ate 8 hours earlier that's now kicking in, or whether it's something you've just eaten, because everything's related to each other. It's not just about, I had something 5 minutes ago, this is what the outcome is. So I think for people who are a bit nervous and a bit of a health worrier, I wouldn't go near a CGM. Obviously, have the conversation with your doctor, because they know how you operate. But things like blood pressure and knowing your your cholesterol levels, I do think are really important. HbA1c, which looks at your 90-day blood sugar, again, it's a really good indication. That's what doctors will use to check for signs of pre-diabetes. So you can either access these things for free through your GP, or you can pay to have yourself tested at quite a low cost. You can go to Boots and have your blood pressure checked for free as well, or a minor cost. I can't remember how they do it. But all these things, I think we need to factor that into our healthcare and not just stand on the scales and expect that if we lose a couple of pounds, our problems will go away. I think these things creep up on us, and knowing our numbers is very key.
I do remember I went to, I think it was Lama last year, and they had a fantastic service where they would take, because farmers are notorious for avoiding a doctor at all costs. Unless it's hanging off, you can fix it yourself. But they were volunteering and taking people's blood pressures there, and doing a very quick and simple test, which I thought was a fantastic service to get those who are more reluctant to make those first steps into caring about themselves. Because like you said, it's easy to ignore, isn't it, until a problem comes up.
Definitely.
We've had a question from Safi, and I guess it sort of relates actually to how we were talking about the processed food, because processed food typically lasts longer. It's less easy to waste it in most cases. But how could we help people not waste their fresh food? Is there anything that we should all be doing, or any actions that growers or supermarkets should be taking?
And again, this is a complex problem. So if you look at how we shop and cook and eat in the UK compared to other countries, we do have this issue that we try and shop less frequently. So we tend to go once or twice a week. I don't know how that's changed post-COVID. I don't know whether we start going back to that, or how that's going to end. But when you look at other countries, for example, the Mediterranean, or even in Asia, if you take Japan, people are shopping more frequently for fresh foods. They're buying it, using it, which inevitably reduces the waste. Whereas we'll buy a job lot of something, and then, after 3 or 4 days, realise it wasn't going to last the 7 days we thought it would. Yeah. And it ends up in the bin, or you decide to go out and then leave it. So waste comes from lots of different avenues. It can come from the plate waste. So, for example, if you over-prepare and you cook more than you eat, so that can end up in the bin. It can also be that you've overshot, so you plan to make 3 meals out of something, you've only made 2, so you've got some left. So it's about thinking of how you plan and prepare and shop is really important, but also not being distracted by over shopping when you see it's getting an extra one free. I was at my parents' one time, my dad, I said to him the last time I was there, I said, we haven't had mushrooms for ages, I really like mushrooms. And he'd gone and bought 5 packs of 300-gram mushrooms. I said to him, had you planned to do something with these? He said, well, you liked mushrooms. Okay. I know I said I like mushrooms. So then I spent the whole weekend just cooking everything with mushrooms and freezing. It's like, do we have to have another mushroom meal again? I said, you bought it, and mushrooms are going to go off in 3 days. So we're going to have mushrooms for every single meal. I just wanted to make it like it. Seriously, because, particularly as people get older, what you tend to find is if you're in a 1 or 2 person household, the pack sizes that you're getting in the supermarket don't work well for you, because you can't get through them quickly enough before it starts to go off. And I do think with the work that I'm doing and looking at some of the barriers that older people have to maintaining a healthy diet, food access is an issue, because you don't want to buy something that you're going to have to throw half of it away from. And it's important that we look at how we can tailor the right pack sizes and combinations of food so that people can get variety. They don't have to eat the same thing 4 or 5 days in a row, but also making sure that you're not losing that, having that waste as well.
Yeah, I think that does make a really big impact on individuals, particularly if you are of that smaller household size. It's better value for money to buy bigger, but then you end up putting a lot of things in your freezer, and if you're anything like me, forgetting that it's there, or having physical access to shops can be a big barrier. Lots of older people, I think COVID really helped people get to understand online shopping and delivery services. But I tend to find actually the use by dates of those are much shorter. And I know that a lot of supermarkets are now removing the best before and use by dates, particularly of fresh produce. But then I think for some generations that can actually be a little bit daunting, because they're like, how do I know that this is safe, particularly if you've got food concerns, or you're you tend to be a bit more paranoid about the safety of your food. I guess that could be quite daunting for them as well, and lots of things end up just being thrown away.
I think you're right. It's been interesting, actually, watching how people behave. So I've been looking at food behaviours in older people, and there's some who are really good saying, well, I know that when it starts to smell, but it also depends on the food. So with fresh produce, you can see quite easily when the quality's gone and it's unusable. But with the other products, for example, milk, does everybody know the point at which it turns? And I think there's a lot of things where they'll never remove the use-by dates because it's a food safety issue. But the best before, I think it's more about quality, isn't it? So it's about people understanding, yes, I can still use it, or I can blitz it. It might not look so nice, I can still eat it. But I think you're right. There's a bit of misunderstanding. And if anyone's interested, there's a really good report that the FSA do, and it's called Food and You Too. It comes out twice a year, and it's a questionnaire that goes out to I think it's about 1,000 families or something like that, and they ask people about their food behaviours and their understanding of food safety, and they do it across the age range. They'll take young people, they'll take older people. It's really interesting to see the different responses they get to the questions on at what point would you hold this in your fridge for, or when would you decide that this was past its best, and things like that, or what do you see as a sustainable source of this particular food. So I find it fascinating to sit and leaf through all the results. If you're into that kind of thing, then do.
I think it's quite interesting to look as well how people view fresh versus sort of frozen or tinned, and actually understanding in some cases nutritional value of frozen or tinned products is equal to or better than fresh produce. People think, well, I'm eating fresh spinach or fresh peas, that must be good for me. But actually a lot of the good vitamins and things have started to break down by that point, even though it still looks lovely and green. And I do agree, frozen vegetables don't hold that same appeal when you plop them onto a plate. But actually, if you're just looking for that nutrition and not that food waste, they're a good alternative, would you say?
They are a good alternative, and it's unfortunate we almost demonise frozen and canned food, and I get why people do that, but if you're lazy about the terminology, it's about having the fruit and vegetables, and the mechanism or the manufacturing process is less of the issue. If you've managed to preserve those nutrients, those important micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, that's really good, and we shouldn't demonise those foods because they've come in a can or a frozen bag or so on. Obviously, if it's canned and it's got cream and salt added, that's a whole different ballgame. But if it is just the canned carrots, then we're good.
Kate says, can Barbara give us her top 3 nutrition tips for middle-aged women, please?
Well, my own personal ones are making sure I've got a diet that's rich, it's diverse. So when you think of carbohydrates, looking at fibre, making sure that you've got that fibre there. Other things that can be a problem is lack of folate for middle-aged women. So green leafy vegetables, so your rocket, your watercress, your spinach are really good to have in. And if I can only have one more, which one will I pick? Do I want to focus on vitamin B12? Oh, yeah, there's so many things I could say, but as we age and once you get into middle age and beyond, our ability to absorb vitamin B12 gets impaired. So it's about making sure that, yes, it's only found in animal-type products, but if you want to take supplements to help you with your vitamin B12, that's also good as well. So they're my top tips.
Lovely. And I guess it leads me on quite nicely. We spoke before, me and Bob have had a chat last week about there's an ever-increasing focus on sort of information around the menopause and women sort of facing the perimenopause, things that just were never spoken about before, and it's all fantastic sort of information sharing and people getting to understand what's going to be happening to their bodies. Do you think that nutrition can play a big factor in controlling some of those symptoms and outcomes of the menopause?
It certainly can. So when you are eating, you tend to just do it. You tend to do the same things over and over again. And that's where a lot of the problem lies, because our bodies are developing. So it's a moving target. So if you carry on eating the same way that you used to, but your body's changing, inevitably there's going to be a bit of a problem. And I think for me personally, I noticed this first with alcohol. I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. And, you can get some really serious hot flushes with it. So that quickly went by the by. It's like, right, okay. And realising that a lot of sugary foods weren't helpful. helpful. But also the time at which you're eating and the quantity that you're eating at certain times of day can vary. And it's personalised. I wouldn't give out blanket advice, but you need to work out for yourself what is causing your digestion problems. And if it's a problem that you can't manage, go and see your GP, because there could be something untoward. It might not just be the menopause, it could be something else in there. But I think it's important to understand that the changes that are happening and look at how you respond to that with food. So if you've got a craving and a snacking, is that just a point in time, or has it carried on and has it been going on for 2 or 3 years? In which case, do you need to seek help? Because often with peaks and troughs across the month, you'll crave certain things and then that'll stop, and then you'll move on to something else or back to your normal diet if you're really lucky. I know for myself, when I've had menopause cravings, like, really? You know you're not hungry, but you feel this, I need to eat something, and that's how it works.
Yeah, that sort of insatiable sense of needing some sort of satisfaction.
Exactly.
I think we've all been there when we've eaten a family pack of crisps and you feel the regret afterwards.
I don't think
the deep shame. Thumbs up yourself.
You're doing well. I think at some point your gag reflex is going to kick in and say stop. Everyone's got their thing, I suppose.
Exactly. Would you say, or have you noticed in any of your research that women are more prone to brush off symptoms caused by a lack of certain nutrition? As well, I'm busy, of course I'm tired, I've got the kids, I'm working full time. Do you think we're more prone than men to just sort of be like, oh, it's something else, but actually we should be focusing on our intake a bit more?
Well, it's interesting you say that. So I was looking at some research figures on women and physical activity versus men and physical activity. And it seems to be that men seem to take better care of themselves as they hit middle age. So you'll see the whole mammals thing, men in lycra on a bike, and women tend to reduce their physical activity. It's almost as if they do fewer things or fewer activities to take care of their health. And so they might not eat as well because... Sorry, there's a big machine going past me right now. So they'll not take as good care of themselves. So snacking, because they're running between missions, either caring and responsibilities for children or caring responsibilities for parents, whatever it is, you'll find that they just shrink their activity that's about helping them do well and thrive. And I don't know what the answer is for that. I just feel that women are sandwiched in impossible situations that men don't get into. Men will be like, right, I'm done. I need space for myself, time for myself. I'm going to go out and find that relaxation and that thing that I need to do that makes me feel better. Whereas women are busy trying to fix everybody else and then forgetting about themselves. So if anyone's got the answer to that, I'm listening.
I would love to know the answer to that. I definitely would know that in myself, and I'm guessing I'm heading towards the perimenopause stage. Didn't realise it happened so young for people. Another wonderful thing that who's been doing a lot about it, that Davina McCall. She's done wonders, but you definitely feel sort of, oh, there's always a reason why you shouldn't do something. Oh, if I can just spend half an hour, then maybe I could just get a couple of loads on, and then maybe I can do a bit of work. And when I've got to travel for work, so you spend a lot of time being sort of stagnant in the car, and I've got to do the school run with the kids and sit through one of their awful plays or shows when you're thinking you could, oh dear, I appear to have lost Barbara there. I will, oh, there we go. You're back again. You popped away there, talking to myself. I do think it is very easy to make those excuses, and I don't think currently people have a lot of answers, but it is good to know that people are talking about that nutritional health, particularly within aging communities where it's not been the focus as much. Christine says, have you done the Tim Spector Guy health test, and should we? I don't know what this is. Do you know what this is, Barbara?
Oh, this is a company called Zoe. Can you still hear me okay? I've just got
I can hear you fine.
Fan behind me. So there's a company called Zoe, and they were created around the time of COVID, I think, and they were doing a lot of the COVID monitoring and testing and getting people. It's one of the largest kind of community type studies where ordinary people just sent in how they were feeling and their symptoms, and it's kind of morphed into looking more at other details of our health, and they've also produced a special diet that people can do to help them manage their blood sugar and have better health and a better relationship with food. So I think, well, there's obviously quite a costly process to do, but again, going back to what we were saying about the continuous glucose monitoring, you're given a continuous glucose monitor app. You have to take on a type of muffin that decides, or that it's like a blue muffin, I think. So they look at the results in your endpoint, your feces. There's a whole lot of tests that they do, but I haven't done it. Friends of mine have, just to see what it's about, but I kind of feel it's targeted a bit at the worried well, because you're not actually learning anything new. You're learning that you might have certain responses to food. But going back to what I said, unless you're having to write down absolutely everything, it makes you very obsessive about what you eat, where you go, the timing of things. And I just feel that once you've gathered all that knowledge, are you really in a better place? Because your shopping habits can be amended. You don't have to go through all of that angst for 2 weeks working out, I ate this and then that happens and then I just think you can sensibly do it just with a personal guidance from a nutritionist or a dietitian and achieve something that's really quite substantial and meaningful. And I know some people will really enjoy going through a trial for a couple of weeks and learning something new and making those behavioural changes, but it does seem quite onerous, and I do worry that if somebody's got anxiety and they're anxious about food already, that is probably not something that you want to be doing.
Yeah, I guess it's having that responsibility and that knowledge in yourself to know when you need to take it to a certain stage, isn't it? And I know that I've seen ones where you can sort of like pinpricks of blood, and it will tell you all the different things that you're potentially allergic to, but realistically, scientifically, you can't prove all of those things. So for some people, I wouldn't say it's a quantum of the test that you can do, but it's a way of making people who are concerned about things potentially overworried. But for some people, it's fantastic knowledge and understanding. I guess you've got to look at it from your own perspective and understand where you will take it.
Definitely. It's not just because your friend's doing it. It's not something you've got to look at it and say, is this right for me? I think you're really on the point with that one. It's about deciding, with personalised products and personalised nutrition, for example, it is about you. It's not about doing what your best friend's done or your hairdresser's said. It's about making sure you're making the right decisions for you and your body and your lifestyle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So with your research company, Barbara, what is it that you're seeing? What is the outcomes that you're looking towards currently?
Well, the stage I'm at the moment, I've just been analysing what the older population are eating, and what I've realised is it's a very varied and wide population. So you can take two people at 65, one can be in perfect health and have a great lifestyle, and another one can be absolutely not. A lot of that is linked to socio-economics. So if you've worked all your life in a low-paid job, lived in social housing, for example, haven't been able to get a lot of money together, it means that you will have a worse outcome from a lifespan and a health span point of view. But then there are other people, middle income, who will also have issues on health span because of the type of lifestyle they've led or the environment that they've been in. So things like air pollution can contribute to reducing your health span. Being a woman will give you a shorter health span on average than being a man. So there's all sorts of things that will impact people's health spans. And what I'm trying to do is find ways in which we can help increase people's health span through helping to improve their diet and their quality of food. But obviously, you can only do that from a point where people are able to access good quality food and it's affordable for them. If people are below that line, it's about looking at other solutions. It's not about their personal choices. It's about using state-funded options or charitable options to try and improve the quality. Or if there's social housing for older people, making sure that it includes eating in commensality, where people can have meals or lunches together, or go to lunch clubs or faith groups and things and have meals that are really good quality, that are going to help them not only socialise but also get the right nutrition. Because what I'm realising is you can't look at nutrition in isolation. You've got to look at it as part of the social structure and the cultural behaviour and physical activity and housing. And it's just one aspect of healthy ageing. It's funny because I was at a conference just a few weeks ago, and a lady who specialises in interviewing and working with people who've reached 100 plus years was saying that we've got all these things that we're doing around nutrition and healthy, making sure we've got enough physical activity in our day. And socializing and what have you, but at the end of the day, your attitude and just letting things go, not holding grudges and being nice to people actually counts for a lot more than you think.
Oh,
and I was like, what?
So I'm right now to tell my partner to stop moaning so much because it's bad. It's actually bad for his health.
It is actually bad for his health. You have it on my authority from what I heard from this,
I'll tell
this
him.
woman who's the worldwide specialist in looking at centenarians. If she said that's what it takes.
Barbara, you talked about, you sort of touched on in terms of socioeconomic type backgrounds, making sure that people have access to almost social eating. Is there any research which sort of supports the fact when you've got communities who their culture is much more social based with large groups eating together or the family units eating together? Is there aging within their elderly population better, worse, or comparable to more isolated, like our communities where we sort of, it's quite normal to eat solo, eat on your own, or just within your small home family?
Yeah, it is supported by evidence that people who are socially isolated and lonely do have poorer health outcomes. You might have heard that, social isolation is akin to smoking in some ways. So that was a piece of research, I think, that came out 3 or 4 years ago, but it's also on the podcast that I did. So I've got a podcast called Women Positively Aging. We did do an episode on social isolation and loneliness. I'll put the links to some of the evidence there. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about being unconsciously incompetent about aging. So, when you're in midlife, you tend to think, I want to retire to the seaside and I'll go for, wild swimming every day and life is going to be fine, not realizing that the further you're away from your support network and a community and people who can support you, and if you're sick, help you and do things like that, the worse of a health span you're going to have, because actually that's what helps you stay healthy. Yes, being by the sea and seeing green and blue every day is really helpful, but actually those social connections are more important than you think. And it doesn't mean that you have to have lots and lots of friends, but it's about having a core few quality relationships that will keep you going as you age. And unfortunately, for a lot of older people, they tend to be friends with the same group of people. So obviously they'll lose more and more friends as they age. And it's about making sure you maintain good social ties across the generations. So you've always got company and people to spend time with.
Yeah, and I think people really saw that impact in COVID. People who weren't used to experiencing isolation were suddenly forced into those situations. And we're still seeing knock-on effects in terms of the work we do. It had a really big impact even on very young people who were suddenly like, well, you can't socialise. You've spent your whole point up until this point never being alone, and now you're on your own, stay in that room, stay in that space, and you can't do anything about it. It's had quite detrimental, long-lasting effects on people's mental health and I guess their physical health as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And we also were sort of just touching on the affordability of food. There's something that came out today, and it was talking about so the buy one get one free is the food offers, and the food offers are actually being too heavily weighted on the more processed, less healthy foods rather than fresh fruit and veg. Do you think there's a responsibility in terms of shifting that dynamic either through the retailers or government to make it that the fresh food is more readily available because it is easier and faster and cheaper in a lot of cases to eat and provide the unhealthy options for your family?
I really haven't got a definite answer to that question. I think it's so complex because we know, for example, with a lot of supermarkets, the funding that is used for the promotions oftentimes comes from the supplier. So if you're taking somebody who's making a minuscule margin and saying, well, you need to fund a promotion so that people can afford to eat, it's not going to be sustainable. So it's about looking at what are the solutions. We need to make sure people do have access to affordable food. But is the retail end the point at which that has to happen? Is it about making sure that people have more money to start with so that they can afford the food that's already there? Because the food, you can't produce it any cheaper.
No.
So if you can't produce it cheaper, how can you retail it cheaper? Because the cost of production is the cost of production. And I'm not a commercially minded person in terms of the cost of the true cost of food production. And I think there's been a couple of trials on the continent. I think Germany and Belgium are looking at putting the true cost of production on pricing of food. So it's made the cost of meat, milk, and things like that go up. So I think those things are interesting, but there's a societal impact and a cultural impact about doing these things. And if you're pricing people out of a whole section of food, you need to make that up somewhere else, either through the welfare system or some other way of making sure that everybody has access to affordable food, and it's not just people who've got a certain income can eat and everyone else can't. And I think that's where we're at the moment. So I have no idea as to what the right mechanism to make that happen is going to be. Personally, I think, making sure everyone's got enough money is the best way, because then you've got dignity.
It's a good starting point. If we can all afford to get that healthy choice, then more and more people will make that right choice for themselves and for their families.
I'd like to think so, but again, it's more complex. It's about making sure that that food is available. So there are places where you can't necessarily easily buy food that is part of a healthy diet. And again, it's the whole cost of fuel, about time and money involved in preparing those foods. So to me, people are always saying everyone should learn to cook, but I think if you've got food that's ready cooked and freshly available, what's the harm in using that? I know we've got this debate about ultra processing, but you think back in the day, it was always just one person in the family that knew how to cook and everyone else ate what that person prepared. I don't see the harm in having food that's prepared for people that are short on time if the food is prepared and it's convenient and it's healthy and it's affordable. You're just taking out the middleman rather than everyone buying the ingredients, taking it home, cooking it. Have a facility or community restaurants where people can go and eat cheaply. And you see it in other countries. If you go to Singapore, they have street food scene where people pour out of their offices at 5 o'clock or whatever time they finish, can't remember, and then go and sit outside and eat a really well-prepared, healthy, cheap meal. And it's just amazing to see. Italy, I've been to canteens where the workers come out at lunchtime, and the canteens don't belong to a particular company. They're just, I guess, the equivalent of a Wimpy or something, back in the old days where everyone used to get their tray and their food. And it's affordably priced 3-course meals that people can have in the middle of the day. So I think every country has found a way of managing it, but we seem to be still running around trying to look for solutions when we can see that there are lots of other options in other countries.
Trying other things. And I think as also, like you said, dispelling that myth that prepared isn't the same as overly processed. It saves time, it saves people money and reduces waste. And the more, obviously, one of the key things is we're wasting less food. Eventually, the cost of those productions are going to come down because we won't just be throwing it away. But it is a complex issue, and I don't think there is any one true fix. I just don't necessarily think it's being looked at in the right way at the moment. It just always seems to be somebody else has got to solve.
Exactly. And it needs to be looked at in the round. So when you think of all the different actors in that space, it's about everybody coming together and looking for a solution rather than saying it's a social problem or a welfare problem or a retail problem, or, we all own it. We need to work together to fix it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bob. It's been really fantastic talking to you. Can you just give me a quick roundup of where other people might be able to find more of your work or information?
Sure. Well, starting off with my podcast, Women Positively Aging. So I think I've sent the link already for the show notes, but you can access that. There's currently 12 episodes across 2 seasons. And what I do for each episode is take a particular aspect of aging. So it could be heart health or brain health or belly fat, whatever it is. And I take an expert who's got a background in the topic and can tell us about the science behind it. And some of them I've also got a guest who might have suffered with the problem that talks about their symptoms and how they've managed to overcome it. I think, for this audience, that'd be quite interesting as well. And then you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn or access my website. So it's www.alo, so that's alo-solutions.com, and see some of the work that I'm doing. And also I will give you the links that I mentioned for the British Nutrition Foundation and so on, because I think people will find that really interesting about their own personal health and how they can find more information. And I'm on the science committee for the British Nutrition Foundation, which is why I'm plugging it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Barbara. And we'll make sure that we put all those links up on the Women in Food and Farming website, and it'll also be included, I won't say definitely because I don't write them, but most probably the next newsletter. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really interesting, and I think it's given everybody a little bit of food for thought, excuse the pun there, and something, just a new perspective and a new look, particularly around that the aging aspect of nutrition. And like we were saying, it's so very little talked about, but actually lots of really interesting things to take away and consider.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for your time. Our next session will be in September, and that is going to be our live session in Savills. You will all have been sent out links to that on the newsletter. And if you'd like to register for that, you can buy tickets through Eventbrite. We've been very kindly supported this month by Agri, who will be sponsoring our free tickets for the under 30s, as we're always really keen to promote those networking opportunities for people starting off their careers within food and farming. Thank you very much. Good evening, all.
Thank you.